Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. They say you should never mix business with love. I learned that the hard way. When I met Jake, I was a second-year MBA student, and he was a scrappy coder with a dream. We collided at a tech meetup in a downtown coffee shop, where he pitched me his half-baked idea for an app that would revolutionize personal finance. I smiled politely, ready to make my escape. But there was something in his eyes, this electric determination that made me stay. By the time the night ended, I was hooked on the idea and on him. Within 6 months, Jake and I were inseparable. I left my part-time job and threw myself into his startup. No salary, no contract, just faith. I worked on business plans, secured angel investors, built partnerships, polished the pitch deck, and even designed the first company logo on my own laptop. Meanwhile, Jake coded late into the night, fueled by coffee and ambition. We were a perfect team. Least I thought we were. The first cracks appeared after the series of funding. Suddenly Jake was CEO, and I was Maya, the girlfriend who helps out. He stopped asking for my input in meetings. He brushed off my suggestions. At parties, when investors asked about the early days, Jake smiled and said, "Yeah, it was tough, but I pulled through." I started noticing the text messages too, the late-night ones from Emily, PR director, who oddly seemed to need Jake's advice on everything from press releases to her personal life. When I confronted him, he laughed. "Come on, Maya, don't be insecure. We're building something huge here. Let's not ruin it with drama." I let it go. 'Cause I believed in him. 'Cause I believed in us. Then came the board meeting that changed everything. I arrived at the office early, carrying 2 trays of coffee and a box of donuts. Jake barely looked up as I walked in. "Maya, can you actually give us the room?" he said casually. Froze. "Excuse me." He flashed his charming grin, the one that used to make my knees weak. "This is, more of an executive conversation. I'll fill you in later, promise." I stood there for a second, heart pounding. Then I turned, left the coffee on the table, and walked out. That night, Jake didn't come home. Over the next few weeks, everything spiraled. He stopped answering my calls. My keycard to the office stopped working. The company website erased my name from the About Us page. When I finally confronted him in person, he didn't even flinch. "It's just business, Maya. We've outgrown you. No hard feelings, okay?" I wanted to scream, but instead I went home, cried, and then got to work. Here's the thing Jake never understood. From day one, I wasn't just his cheerleader. I was his co-founder in everything but title. And more importantly, I had paper. In the early days, Jake had begged me for help funding the app. I poured my savings into the company, wiring thousands from my own account. In exchange, he drafted a simple contract, a promise of 40% ownership until formal shares were issued. It was never formalized. It was never revoked. And it was signed by him. I pulled the wrinkled document out of a dusty folder in my closet, ran my fingers over his messy signature, and felt something inside me harden. He thought I was gone. He thought he'd won. But I was just getting started. The first lawyer I spoke to raised an eyebrow. "You've been sitting on this for how long?" "Too long," I said quietly. She smiled. "Let's shake things up." For months we worked in secret. My lawyer tracked down old emails, text messages, receipts, even Slack chats from the early days. We built a timeline, my money, my work, my contributions. Meanwhile, Jake's company exploded in the press. TechCrunch, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal. They all ran glowing profiles of the young visionary CEO. I watched each one with a quiet, burning calm. Then the hospital bills started arriving, courtesy of the stress-induced ulcer I'd developed. I stared at the medical invoices and thought, I gave you everything, Jake. And you left me with this. The day of the confrontation arrived. I walked into the boardroom in a simple black suit, flanked by my lawyer. The executives looked up in surprise. Jake froze, his arm around Emily's chair. "Maya," he said slowly. "What are you doing here?" Smiled. "Just business, Jake. No hard feelings." My lawyer slid the contract onto the table. Jake's face drained of color. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the AC vent. Jake stared at the document as if it were written in a foreign language. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her fingers tightening around her tablet. The board members, all sharp suits and sharper eyes, leaned in, murmuring among themselves. "Jake," one of them said slowly. "What's this?" Jake cleared his throat. It's nothing. An old draft. Outdated." But when he reached for the paper, my lawyer placed her hand on it, calm and steady. "Not outdated," she said smoothly. "Binding." I didn't need to say much that day. The evidence spoke for itself. The wire transfers from my account. The emails between Jake and me outlining the startup's launch. The signed agreement promising me 40% of the company. For the first time, Jake's legendary charm wasn't enough. I watched the board members exchange glances, whisper in low tones, scroll through their phones as my lawyer laid out the timeline. And then came the fatal blow. My lawyer handed over a folder, a thick, damning collection of internal memos, dated screenshots, and emails showing Jake's systematic erasure of my name from the company's records. One board member let out a low whistle. Emily paled, eyes darting between Jake and the documents. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. "Look, Maya, we can fix this. We can come to some agreement." I tilted my head, studying him. The golden boy. Genius. Now scrambling, sweating under the weight of his own arrogance. "No hard feelings, Jake," I murmured. "It's just business." The meeting ended with stunned silence. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. Text from Jake. "Jake, please. Let's talk. Don't do this." I didn't reply. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, tech blogs were ablaze. Co-founder sues CEO for ownership rights. Shocking lawsuit rocks rising fintech star. Visionary CEO faces legal battle from former partner. I watched it unfold from my tiny apartment, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a mug of cold coffee in hand. My inbox filled with messages. Reporters, old colleagues, even friends I hadn't spoken to in years. But the one email that mattered came from the board. "We'd like to meet with you privately to discuss a resolution." The private meeting was held at a sleek downtown office, the kind of place where the walls smelled like money. This time there was no Emily, no swaggering Jake, just me, my lawyer, and a room full of powerful men and women trying to contain the fallout. "We believe the cleanest resolution," the board chair said carefully, "would be a buyout." I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled. "I'm listening." The offer they put on the table made my breath catch. It wasn't just generous, it was life-changing. More money than I had ever imagined having. Enough to start over 100 times. But more importantly, it would strip Jake of his majority control. He would be CEO in name only, the figurehead of a company now owned by the people he once dismissed. I glanced at my lawyer. She gave me the faintest of nods. "I accept," Jake called that night. His voice was hoarse, exhausted. "Maya, why? Why are you doing this?" For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the months of dismissal, the erased credit, the quiet humiliations, the ulcer, the empty apartment. "I'm not doing this to you, Jake," I said quietly. "You did this to yourself." In the weeks that followed, I kept a low profile. Jake stayed on as CEO, but his empire was crumbling. Investors were wary. The press circled like sharks. Employees whispered about the woman who'd come back from the shadows and flipped the whole company upside down. I moved into a small but beautiful townhouse, enrolled in a painting class I'd always wanted to try, and began exploring a non-profit venture to help female founders navigate early-stage investments. I was no longer building someone else's dream. I was building mine. One evening, I found myself standing outside the old startup office. The lights were still on. Jake was visible through the window, bent over his desk, rubbing his temples, the weight of his choices heavy on his shoulders. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Not regret exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement of the history between us. Then I turned and walked away. 6 months passed. By then, the headlines had quieted. The reporters had moved on. Jake's once flawless reputation was permanently dented, though the company still floated on. Smaller, less ambitious, but surviving. As for me, I was free. I had become the name whispered at founder events. The woman who had walked away with millions, her dignity, and a reputation for quiet power. Investors reached out. Startups invited me to advise, mentor, sit on boards. Doors that had once been closed or casually slammed in my face were now wide open. One sunny morning, I stood on a rooftop in downtown LA, glass of champagne in hand, overlooking a gathering of female entrepreneurs. I was the keynote speaker. As I spoke about resilience, betrayal, the dangers of blind trust, and the power of knowing your worth, I saw heads nodding, eyes shining. These women understood. They'd been dismissed, underestimated, overlooked. But not anymore. After the event, as I packed up to leave, a familiar voice stopped me. Maya! Turn. Jake stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, hair a little grayer, face more lined. He wasn't the polished star I remembered. He looked human. Congratulations, he said quietly. I saw your talk. You're doing well. He nodded. I am. He shuffled his feet. Listen, I wanted to say I was an idiot. I never thought you'd walk away. I didn't think you had it in you. I smiled faintly. That's the problem, Jake. You never saw me. He exhaled, nodding slowly. Yeah, he murmured. I guess I didn't. That night, I sat on my balcony, barefoot, legs curled under me, watching the city lights flicker. My phone buzzed with a message from my lawyer. Lawyer. Final wire transfer complete. You're officially out of the company. I felt a strange mix of grief and peace. I had spent years pouring myself into that company, into Jake's dream, and now I was done. But here's the twist Jake never understood. I never wanted to destroy him. I just wanted to be seen, to be counted, to claim what I had built. The money, the buyout, the media storm, those were just side effects. The real victory was coming back from the edge and rebuilding myself. A year later, I launched my own venture, a fund dedicated to women founders. I called it Phoenix Capital, because that's what I was. Not a victim, not an ex, not a cautionary tale. A woman who burned down her past and rose from the ashes. One afternoon, as I walked through my office, I passed a group of young women crowded around a whiteboard, excitedly sketching out product ideas. They glanced up, beaming as I walked by. They knew my story. They knew why I fought, why I left, why I came back. And as I watched them, something inside me settled. I didn't need Jake's approval. I didn't need the past to applaud. I had built something of my own, something that mattered. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with reinvention. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.